Okay, so there is, I have mentioned it several times, One Health, but I think we're at the point that you really need to understand a little bit more about the whole One Health program. And basically, it's implementing the UN Agenda 21, the Millennial Goals 2030, but it has some things that I will be talking about this week. So I really think it's important for us to go over it. So I'm going to share screen and we'll see how this goes. Okay, so what you're looking at is a presentation that I did in September of 2011 with a friend of mine that I've worked in the trenches with called The Truth Farmer. And it is about One Health. And the picture that you're seeing, the cash cow, and they've known all along it was going to be one hazard, one health, one medicine, and one world. And so that's what they've been working towards for quite some time. Actually, several hundred years they have been working towards this. And the picture actually comes from the Mass Animal Carcass Management PowerPoint from Texas A&M. Now they've kind of gone underground, so you don't get as much as you used to be able to get. So now some of you may have already heard me say this, but there's the Terrestrial Animal Health Code, the Terrestrial Manual of Diagnostics and Vaccinations, and the Terrestrial Aquatic Code. Each of those is 1,500 pages. They began in 2005, and they are updated each May, which means they started out at 1,500 pages each, but now they are, who knows how, I have not counted to see how many pages they are now. And the Terrestrial Animal Health Code is where they introduced what I believe is the precursor to the mark of the beast. And so the code was established, and the U.S. is a UN signatory member, and it was not brought to you or your public officials for a vote. When the code is fully implemented, it will regulate every facet of your life, and that is what they're going for in this decade. From 2020 to 2030, they want 100% implementation. In this code, it defines you as an animal, and you are going to be treated as part of the global herd. And in the Terrestrial Animal Health Code, you are defined as an animal, and an animal means any mammal, bird, or bee. A very interesting thing that a lot of people are not aware of is that back, I don't know the date, I put it in one of my articles, but animal medicine and human medicine merged. And I think that actually I'll come up on the date for that. And that announcement and memorandum it was an agreement, a contractual agreement between animal medicine and human medicine. And it was done in Thailand, and it wasn't on too many people's radars, so they didn't pick it up. And under the One Health program, veterinarians are being trained in human health, as you see right here, and human doctors are being trained in veterinary care. It's called a multidisciplinary view of medicine. And then I'm sure that many of you have heard me say that right now that health officials, that's your public health officials, have the authority to enter your property to inspect to UN standards, which is why I suggested that you get the constitutional no trespassing sign. Health officials have the authority to test everything on your property to UN standards. And like I mentioned, there's only a handful of independent labs in the whole world. So the chances of, if you have a dispute on what they say, it's not likely that you're going to get an independent laboratory to defend your position. Health officials have the authority to vaccinate all life forms on your property, and that is a forced vaccination, and that can be to their whole list of diseases, which is quite incredible. So that's another reason to have that constitutional no trespassing sign. Health officials also have the authority to electronically identify all forms of life on your property. And, how does that make you feel? We live in America, or we're supposed to have constitutional freedoms, but actually our politicians have sold us out and have given over authority to the United Nations. So what is One Health? One Health is a collaborative effort of multiple disciplines working locally, nationally, and globally to attain optimal health for people, animals, and the environment. And that comes from the One Health Initiative Task Force in 2008. And of course, the emphasis is going to be on the animals first, wildlife, and then people and domestic animals. It is the integration of human, animal, and wildlife conservation through sustainable medicine. Now, sustainable medicine is called precision medicine, so you can use those interchangeably, but in the beginning, it was called sustainable medicine, if you go back and want to do a historical search. So in order to save the planet, resources have been determined to be scarce. And so this is a fraud perpetrated on all of humanity. And basically through a Dr. Mengele mathematical, algorithm, it includes your value, your production, your age, your risks, your problems, your consumption, and the formula will be used to determine if you get medical care or if your neighbor's goldfish is going to get medical care instead of you. And so you can look forward to a day when you go to your doctor and you will sit next to a dog in the waiting room. But who will get the scarce resources? That's the question. Think it can't happen? It began in the year 2000. So what One Health does is it gives raw power to politicians. Of course, everything is environmental health right now. Almost every human disease can be caused, modified, or altered by an environmental agent. So what is the mission and the vision of One Health? It wants to integrate animal, human, and ecosystem health all into one discipline. And how are they going to achieve that? So they knew long ago that people have this innate fear of bugs, especially superbugs, and that they were going to be releasing some really nasty bugs, and it would scare humanity into accepting this One Health vision that they have. They're merging medical schools and the Department of Health. They have joint communication, joint clinical care, assessment, treatment, and prevention of cross-species disease transmission, joint disease surveillance and control, development and evaluation of new diagnostic methods, medicines, and vaccine for the prevention and control of diseases for cross-species disease transmission, and joint efforts to persuade political leaders and through public manipulated media. And basically, humans and animals, so when we're looking at this coronavirus, they are not only looking at human treatment and therapies and vaccinations, they are looking at animal also. What is the scope of One Health? Well, it includes a lot of different things. It embraces the whole food supply, the water supply, human health, the environment, disease prevention, surveillance, and response. I mean, you're even talking like non-communicable diseases such as obesity or diabetes. It embraces clinical medicine, translational research. There's big questions about the ethics and morals. It impacts global trade and commerce, as we're all going to find out with the novel coronavirus. There's been little public awareness and communications, a little bit, like with the avian influenza and with the Ebola, but it's not anything like what it's going to be. And they have established public policy and regulations. And I went through one of those regulations with you that was put in the Federal Register. They are required by law to put those regulations in the Federal Register. And at the state level, there are also different regulations. So there's regulations at the state level and there's regulations at the federal level. It will also include how we, do agriculture, the agricultural production, and our land use issues. And it will impact the training of health professionals because now they are going to be trained cross-disciplinary. But that seems, so they're going to get, they're going to know how to treat a dog and they're going to know how to treat you. But when getting down to the brass tacks of maybe your particular health issue, they're not going to be able to address that. And by the way, you are going to see lots of hyperlinks to the website where I forensically documented all these changes as they happened real time. Unfortunately, when David was killed, my website was hacked and I just plain couldn't deal with it at the time. And so I lost that. So those links will not work. So one of the big things that they need to be successful is to overcome many barriers. And part of that is your public perception. And now with the coronavirus, that is going to overcome a lot of barriers as the world clamors for something to make them safe and free of disease. And freedom, that brings us to freedom. So the UN, and this is a long time ago, they defined freedom and that you would have to provide proof of freedom for biosecurity purposes, and that freedom is associated with good husbandry, which means being a good global citizen, and the care of humans, or animals and humans, as defined by the United Nations. That is not how we define freedom, but it's not our definition that counts. It is their definition. So of course, the UN wants a good husbandry as the norm, and there's supposedly 5 freedoms: freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom to express normal behavior, and I would say that that is actually sexually deviant behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. This sounds really good, the way that they put it, but basically, if you have any one of these problems, then you are a burden to society and you must be eliminated. So they're not going to address your hunger and thirst, your discomfort, your pain, your disease, your fear, your distress. They are just going to eliminate you. And like I mentioned, One Health is a worldwide collaboration, and I'm going to kind of go through the timeline, and I think it's going to be surprising for you that the One Health concept started about 1761. Actually, some people say that it started with Aristotle. It just depends on, how far back you want to go. And then there was Edward Jenner, the founder of the smallpox vaccination. All of the early people were advocates of a joint human and veterinary medicine. So philosophically, its roots, that One Health roots, are founded in scientific autocracy of Henri de Saint-Simon, and in the positivism of Auguste Comte, the father of social sciences. Positivism elevates science and scientific methodology above metaphysical biblical revelation. This worldview holds that social progress is only possible through science and technology, and that's why they refuse to debate anybody on a metaphysical, biblical, or biblical revelational conversation. It's a social movement, like I said, in the early days, called sustainability, and you still hear that word, although not really associated with medicine so much. It's energy-based accounting system that can be tracked back to the 1930s, when an obscure group of engineers and scientists offered it as a solution for the Great Depression, technocracy. So beginning in 1987, we began to see it evolving, and I am going to use that evolutionary term, into kind of what we know today. There was a sustainable medicine that was introduced to the World UN and the World Commission, and I do have that link. I'm not sure if it's still valid or not. In 1996, sustainable medicine was introduced as a new modality to medicine, and physicians began to implement it. So that was 1996. In 1999, the Society for Tropical Veterinary Medicine had their 5th conference in Florida, and I've talked about that quite a bit. The theme was tropical diseases, control and prevention in the context of the New World Order. And at that conference, if you look at the proceedings, you will discover that they knew all along that there would be some tropical diseases that would be let loose and cause such fear and panic in the world that the world would accept anything to be safe and secure from those diseases. Basically, in 2001, the era of sustainable veterinary medicine began. On September 29th, 2004, health experts from around the world met at a symposium for potential movements of diseases among humans, domestic animals, and wildlife, and that was organized by the Wildlife Conservation Society and the Rockefeller University. And I'm sure that you can tell just by who the actors are that it was not pro-human. And so they assembled expert panelists, set priorities, and began an international, interdisciplinary approach to combat health threats to the planet Earth. This group came up with a product known as the Manhattan Principles. There were 12 recommendations. And remember that the first time that we heard about the Manhattan came into our vocabulary was the code name for a project conducted during World War II to develop the first atomic bomb. This is the 21st century equivalent. It is a atomic bomb that has just been launched. In 2004, One World, One Health began, and there was, if I can get my mouse to be cooperative, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and they did several resolutions saying that One Health, One World, relating to the interface between human and wildlife diseases. In October 2007, the Wildlife Conservation Society announced a One Health project in Brazil, and it was funded by Cargill and the One World, One Health Conservation Society. And if you're familiar with Cargill, they basically are a big corporate food producer for America and the world. On October 8th, the One Health initiative and website were launched. And if you're interested in this topic, they do have weekly updates, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. So you might check it out. It's called the onehealthinitiative.com. In 2009, One Health was heralded as the Rosetta Stone for the 21st Century Health. In June 2009, the One Health Commission was chartered, and that included the American Medical Association, the American Veterinary Medical Association, microbiologists, medical colleges, veterinary medical colleges, and so forth. On March 23rd, 2010, there was introduced into Congress a bill called One Health for the People. It was House Resolution 3590, the Patient Protection and Affordability Act. And of course, that went through many evolutions of itself, but it is now the law of the land. In March 2010, the Agriculture Conference called the NIAA, it is one of the biggest actors and drivers for the direction that agriculture will take for the next year, did their conference on One Health from all different aspects. On April 6, 2010, as you can see, 2010 was a big year for One Health. There was a call to action to prevent cross-species transmission of diseases. On April 13th, the One Health Commission was established, and it linked and joined forces, collaborated, did a liaison for the implementation and institutionalization of One Health as soon as possible. And then on April 18th, 2010, the U.S. Army actually transformed its healthcare into a One Health system, and that happened within 6 months of April. Then there were some other things that happened. August 30th, the American Medical Association reaffirms One Health. You'll see that again and again, everyone reaffirming. They are saying that this is the only way to go. September 13th through 16th, there was Healthy Wildlife, Healthy People Conference following Agenda 21. And of course, animals were first. September 20th through the 21st, there was a consortium of universities for global health and an interdisciplinary formation and transformation. September 23rd and 24th, Homeland Security, the new Plum Island in Kansas joined forces with Texas A&M under One Health. Then on September 24th, the first gay and lesbian One Health conference took place in San Diego, California. It's very important to know that this does have a very active gay and lesbian component to it. That is why if you want a sex change, you are likely to get it. But if you need antibiotics for something or a surgery, you're probably going to be denied depending on your age and usefulness to the global good. Fall of 2010, One Health will format and drive this year's influenza preparation and response. And it the Department of Homeland Security strategically established 14 centers of One Health excellence around the United States. So in 2011, there was the first International One Health Congress in Victoria, British Columbia. And as you can see, their logo included the DNA. And so there's the DNA component to this One Health. That's one reason that I believe that this is the precursor to the mark of the beast. The Congress will be setting the scene or the stage, so to speak. They talked about disease emergence, environmental drivers, trade, food security, food safety, policy and political action, and global survival. And those of you that have listened to me for any length of time know that I've been talking about One Health since 2005. And there is what is called the Asilomar conferences. There are 3 Asilomar conferences. The first one was back in 1975, and the World Power Brokers met at Monterey, California, and it was developing a plan to genetically modify the DNA and RNA of all life on Earth. And they basically set the ground rules and commenced the evil plan. And then in 2010, the similar group of scientists and power brokers met for Asilomar 2 with the express purpose of geoengineering the planet, weather modification. It might be the second part of the binary weapon. I'm not positive on that. It might be take the form of a 3 type where you need the vaccination also. Some scientists that spoke with anonymity at this conference, and I did cover that Asilomar conference real time. And then the third conference was Managing the Planet and Its Health by Artificial Intelligence. That was held in 2018. Now, I did mention the Manhattan Principles, and there's 12 pillars, and you might want to know what those are. And they are to link animal, wildlife, the food supply, environment, and economy into one package. It would include land and water use, impact, as well as disease emergence and the spread or manifestation of any disease. Wildlife must be considered in a cross-disease prevention, surveillance, monitoring, and mitigation. That means anybody who's going to get dollars needs to put the wildlife into it. Human health must fit into the conservation box. Take all species into account and adapt a holistic, primitive, and sustainable approach to cross-disease prevention, surveillance, monitoring, and mitigation. You're going to be hearing a lot about that in the next days to months with this novel coronavirus. Fully integrate conservation into all human needs, environment first, and then the people. Reduce the demand and develop novel pathogen host relationships and apply to the agriculture, health, conservation, trade, and economy. It is my contention that this novel coronavirus was a deliberate bioweapon release, and it also occurred from the same facility at the same time in the people's blood, the plant destroyer, which who knows how much damage that particular thing is going to do for people in this growing season. Let's see, where was I? Restrict mass culling of wildlife if they pose a threat to humans or their food. And so you got to read that twice. They're going to restrict mass culling of wildlife if they pose a threat to humans or their food. So basically, you're not allowed to cull anything if it's wildlife, if it's threatening your garden, your animals. There, let's say a bunch of deer they do have a chronic wasting disease. You can't kill those deer. They want them there as vectors. They're going to increase investment in human and animal infrastructure, especially surveillance. So the goal is not to treat you or cure you. It's just to watch you squirm and be experimented up on and drain all the money from you. And then just it'll be the end of your life. It is going to be a collaboration between government, local, private, public sectors towards biodiversity and conservation. We see that with the deployment of DARPA's Habitus that I just wrote on last week. And if you're not familiar with that, go to my blog, shepherdsheart.life/blog/news, and you can read about the Habitus. Provide resources and support for global wildlife, and influence policy to integrate health and the ecosystem for a happier or healthier planet. So who are the players? Who are the actors? So you've got the AMA, the American Medical Association. You've got the American Veterinary Association. You've got the World Association of Labs. You've got diagnosticians. You've got physiologists. You've got Phytopathological Society, medical colleges, public health, microbiologists, epidemiologists, fish and wildlife, USAHA, I think it's Health Association, that even the National Park Service has a One Health goal and mission. These are people that you know and trust, but you really shouldn't be. So we've entered basically, many of you are familiar with the Hegelian dialectic, and this is what they're trying to do, is to change your belief system from a biblical belief system to their Hinduistic, pantheistic, post-human philosophy. And how they're doing it is through the dialectic process. And every time that you compromise your belief system and your absolute values, so let's say you say I think, or I want, or I could. Basically, you're entering a dialogue, and your absolute value system is on the line. So let's say I know that I have this red apple, and I know it's red, and the person that is the dialectic says, but how do you know that it's red? Don't you see a little twinge of green in there? And you say, no, I know that it's red, but you have entered that conversation instead of just stopping the conversation. And that's what we need to do. It's just stop the conversation. And that's actually what the other side is doing. They will not compromise their position. They maintain that they have the high ground. So that's why you cannot discuss anything with these people, because they are aware of this Hegelian dialectic process. Unfortunately, the public is not always as aware. It's a process called diaprex, or Hegelian dialectic, and you can find more information. The man that runs this, he used to have a YouTube. I'm not sure if it's still up. One never knows these days. But it was called authorityresearch.com, or you might be able to look up diaprex on YouTube and see if it's still available. And then this article I just took the article from the Military Times, and I just kind of underlined all of the things of how they were going to implement the Army in 6 months to a One Health health command. And so you can see that that's you know, that's already a fact. So why is One Health dangerous? Because not every partnership is mutually beneficial, especially in a post-human era. These people really have an anti-human, post-human ideology. And so it is terrible to even think about. Unfortunately, this is where we are. This is what we're going to be facing with this novel coronavirus. It's going to be interesting to see how far they go. I ran into some pretty alarming information that I will be sharing with you this week of how far this thing has come. That's why I did this little introduction to One Health for you. And I think what we need to remember is that for the last 100 years, there's just been this blazing legal battle between animals and humans. And actually, during the 1990s, academia was like wrestling, who is prime, animals or humans. And after maybe 10 years, they finally came to the conclusion that the animals had primacy. And that basically set the stage for everything that the United Nations is doing and for this Hinduistic, pantheistic ideology to go global or viral, as you might say. But we have to remember that we are children of the living God. We were bought by the blood of Jesus. And so we need to remember who's in control and just smile, because his will eventually be done. He is going to purge evil from the earth. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a very fun time for a little while, but then we have all eternity to just be joyful and worshipful and just be thankful that we crossed the finish line, and we are going to hear those comforting and wonderful words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." So that's your introduction for One Health, and I will be having some more on this issue this week. Some breaking news that I just discovered today that I haven't even had time to fully research yet. So anyway, have a blessed day, and we will talk to you later.